Good afternoon, and on behalf of Youthprise, welcome to our final Disrupting with Purpose of 2023. This has been a great year with some really insightful discussions. I think we've talked about expungement, cannabis legislation, gun violence, and now we're going to end the year with a discussion on education. If you've been with us for a while, you know that our youth panelists always give us something to think about, and more importantly, they give us something to act on. And so I'm sure today is not going to be any different. Our topic is a continuation of our September installment, which was Cultural Climate Change Education Edition. And I think this is actually the first time that we've done a part two, but this is such an important discussion that has so many facets. And we could not think of anyone better to help guide us through the dialogue than Lissa Jones-Lofgren. Lissa has been hanging with us since the beginning. She's no stranger to moderating tough topics and deep discussions, having hosted Black Market Reads, as well as Urban Agenda on KMOJ for many years. And I learned today that she's also now the interim director of Haven House in Minneapolis. So Lissa, we are so appreciative of your commitment to Youthprise and Disrupting with Purpose. And without further ado, we'll turn things over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I'm so delighted to be here and feel so privileged to be moderator for this wonderful series. Disrupting with Purpose is exactly what Youthprise is about and exactly what our panel is about to do. Today, we're going to talk about Cultural Climate Change Education Edition, Part 2. So let's go ahead and get right to it. I'm very excited to introduce Megan Chow-Smith. She's with Taiko Arts Midwest, Mighty Drumming Club. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, I am Megan Chow-Smith with Taiko Arts Midwest. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the director of the Mighty Drumming Club, a Japanese drum group and non-clinical therapeutic space for young folks in the Twin Cities age 12 to 18. The Mighty Drumming Club has met just a few times this fall, but they are a visual and graphic group of artists very excited to put this video together for this event. We are committed to putting their voices and work forward. They actually created, directed, and led the following video on their own. Josephine Smith-Weir and Gabe Wallenfeld are the first two youth speakers introducing the club in the video you're about to see. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Josephine, and I go by any pronouns, and this is the Mighty Drumming Club. Well, what is the Mighty Drumming Club, you might ask? Well, it's a youth taiko program, I guess. Group? I don't know. Well, what is taiko? Taiko is a Japanese art form that includes Japanese drums, and they're really loud and stuff. Why I do taiko is because it's fun and loud.
I like how fulfilling it is.
Frankly, I just like doing this.
There. All right, see, these are the people.
Did you know taiko makes you feel G-O-O-D?
Taiko makes your heart beat faster.
I would love to thank the Tyco Arts Midwest Mighty Drumming Club. And thank you, Megan, for being here and for sharing that important piece with us. It's so good to see young people doing things that are so beautifully rooted in culture. So culture will be something we're going to pick up later in our conversation today. So thank you so much. I now have the privilege to introduce a person who will provide some context for our conversation, who will give us a container, if you will. Danielle Grant, please. Thank you, President and CEO of Achieve Twin Cities. Welcome to Disrupting with Purpose.
Thank you so much. I am really happy to be here. Very excited for our conversation that we have ahead of us. So my name's Danielle Grant, and I'm the President and CEO of Achieve Twin Cities. In case you don't know, Achieve Twin Cities is a leading career and college readiness organization in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And each year, we help over 18,000 young people plan for life after high school and discover, explore, and develop their own personal career pathways. So prior to my work at Achieve, I was a longtime administrator in Minneapolis Public Schools. As Executive Director of Educational and Cultural Services, I worked on fostering positive school-wide engagement, supporting social-emotional learning, and building culturally responsive instructional strategy across the district. I'm extremely passionate about building school cultures and communities that support all students and enable them to develop into their whole selves. In the course of this work, I've been able to work with many outstanding teachers, counselors, social workers, and administrators who truly shared the vision of building school communities centered around our students' well-being. But there are also many challenges in this work, and sometimes the work of building our positive school communities didn't always take the priority that it should. One of the main things that my work has taught me throughout my career is that relationships are everything. The job of the teacher is to be in relationship with their students. This means getting to know them, their backgrounds, and the way that they see the world. Learning happens best in an environment that supports the entire personhood of each student. This means being responsive to their cultures, their learning styles, and their emotional needs. This is proven out in a 2020 study from the Everyone Graduates Center at the Johns Hopkins University School of Education. This study points to the importance of creating a holistic learning environment that encompasses not just academic learning, but also space for social and emotional development in positioning young people for life success beyond school. So as we emerge from the pandemic, it's clear that our students need supportive school communities more than ever. How can teachers, administrators, and others help create a culture in schools that promotes the mental, physical, social, emotional, and academic well-being of students? And what role do students play in establishing school communities that support them and help them learn? As mentioned in the September Disrupting with Purpose dialogue on Climate Change Education Edition, the panel of young people touched on this subject and provided insightful views of their experience and perspectives in K-12 education. But as that session ended, it was realized this is such a complex issue that there was so much more to discuss, which is why we're talking about it today. So today's dialogue will continue that discussion about how we can shift the cultural climate of education in a way that can build emotional well-being, equitable opportunities, and academic success for all of Minnesota's Black, Indigenous, and students of color. To that end, we'll have a multi-generational discussion, and that'll address two topics: promoting a culture that is conducive to the emotional well-being and success of teachers, students, administrators, and staff, and number two, the importance of including young people's voices in how to improve the current environment. So I'm really looking forward to this. Cannot wait to hear from our youth panelists and be able to engage with them. And now I will turn this back over to Lissa so we can get started.
Danielle, that was fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That set the stage perfectly. Let me please begin by inviting our three youth panelists to the camera. We will be having a discussion, getting their feedback and hearing from them, and then it will be followed up by an adult responder who will also come on and respond. And then we'll do that again next time. So let me first say welcome, DJ Mickey Breeze, Julian Spencer, and Lincoln Bacall. Welcome back to Disrupting with Purpose. Delighted to see each of you.
Same here, glad to be back.
Excellent, thank you for being here. Let's talk about culture. Lincoln, may I begin with you? Focusing on the idea, team, that we're promoting a culture that's conducive to the emotional well-being and success of students, teachers, administrators, and staff, as Danielle just so aptly put it. Is it important for schools to affirm students' experiences, to help them develop holistically, academically, mentally, health and life, home life, and social life? Is it the school's responsibility? Is it important? Lincoln, would you please start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you started with this question because I think it gets kind of contentious when we live in a world where teachers are chronically underpaid, school systems are underfunded and under-resourced, and yet all of our social systems are underfunded and under-resourced. And so, if we're in this reality where young people are continually not getting the resources they need elsewhere, then I really do believe that it is the role of the school system to provide those things, not because the school system is a more important social system than any other, but because I believe that it is probably, like, realistically the easiest avenue for change that we as organizers and stakeholders and people who care about young people can make an impact on. I really believe that, I've seen great examples in my own education of schools that are able to use their resources to support students beyond what, government programs or existing social systems have been able to do.
Always thoughtful, always dropping wisdom. Thank you, Lincoln. DJ Mickey Breeze, it looks like you might be up.
I believe that it is a parental responsibility to foster that sort of mindset, or to, I would say, instill that sort of mindset or those values with their kids, but I believe it should be fostered in schools. A lot of the times there are some parents or some people who believe that school is meant primarily for the education of their children and any sort of values that have to do with some sort of social aspect. But I've always believed in schools as more of an educational institution, and if something social and positive can arise, that's more of a plus. But I believe a lot of the cultivation of somebody's personality, somebody's values, and someone's overall well-being should start at home. If a school doesn't have a more nurturing environment to help those things carry on, then I definitely believe that is a problem, but I don't feel like that is a priority at school to sort of enforce those sort of things, or I wouldn't say encourage, but overall initiate that sort of thing.
It's a collaborative effort. Thank you.
It's a definite collaborative effort. It's built off of community, but I believe it starts at home.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Please be safe. I must admit, I just want you to be safe. And Julian, welcome. What about you? What are your perspectives?
Thank you so much for having me again. Very appreciate that. So just off of my experience of being in the school system, even at a very young age, I had problems in my home life. Mother dealt with mental health issues. My father, he had to raise 4 kids and had to work a lot. So with that being said, I really did rely on my education system and my community around me to be able to meet needs that I needed that were crucial to my development. And with that being said, the education system, in my experience, did not do a great job at looking at me as a holistic human. I believe that they really define me by my mistakes. And I think as a young person that really it's really just heartbreaking, and it kind of internalizes a feeling of doubt and lack of trust in a place where you have to be for five days out of the week in a school year. So I really do feel like the school system should be able to meet young people's needs, because if they're not looking at them as a holistic human, a young person can really just feel discouraged and feel left out. For me, my needs were not getting met in school, so I went to go get my needs met in the streets, and I felt purpose in that. But I think I really believe that if the school system could have did a better job of just looking at me as a whole person and doing things like asking me, Julian, like, why did you do that childish prank? What were you thinking? What's going on in your home life? asking me just simple questions, just really trying to get to know me. I think it would have been my experience would have been a lot different. But instead of asking those questions, instead I feel like they really just criminalized me for things that I did with no malicious intent. So for me, that was very, very life changing, and it really put me on a trajectory that a lot of young people end up getting on. And if our school system is not doing their job of meeting young people's needs, then they're gonna get their needs met elsewhere. And with that being said, I would say that I have friends today that have been through similar circumstances as me who aren't here today because of these similar things. Of finding purpose in negative mentorship and negative environments instead of an environment that is meant for young people to succeed. So I would say that actually, when it comes to meeting young people's needs, it's honestly the difference between life or death sometimes.
Julian, I can't thank you enough. One of the things I find so profound is that the next question we were going to talk about is what infrastructure is necessary to make that whole student space sort of accessible, more accessible, especially mental health. And I was just struck by the fact that you've got these people looking for these lofty ideas, and you said, just ask me. You say, it doesn't cost you anything to ask me. What about me? Lincoln, you are agreeing. Please share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to just start off and with a couple of things that I went to a non-traditional project-based charter school for high school. And I'd love to just share a couple of the things that they did, just material supports to students that I actually don't think are too complex. So first off, our school had a washer and a dryer for young people who didn't have a way to wash their clothes at home, because that was a reason that young people wouldn't come to school, is they couldn't wash their clothes, so they didn't have clean clothes. So really, really basic thing that I think is missed in a lot of conversations around being accommodating towards students. Another thing was our school provided breakfast, lunch, and dinner for free 5 days of the week. So if you got there early enough, there would be breakfast. And if you stayed for the after school program, there would be dinner. So I think that just, clean clothes, food are really, really basic things that I think are even a precursor to having a conversation around mental health and around being accommodating. Because if you don't have your basic needs met, I don't think any young person would have the capacity to engage in their education meaningfully at all. And with the idea of being holistic, I think that, obviously we have an issue in Minnesota around not having enough counselors per student. I think it's 700 students to one counselor, which is ridiculous and impossible to work with. So, I mean, even that issue aside, incorporating those values around mental health into the classroom and into the educational environment. So like Julian said, just being receptive to student feedback and inviting feedback in the first place, creating a safe space where students know that even, the most basic request will be taken seriously. In my experience in my high school, students were asked, what can we do to make the school different? And the first things that they would say are oh, we'd like lunch to be longer. We'd like better food at lunch. This food is not my favorite. And teachers wouldn't take that seriously because they were looking for higher level, what's wrong with the curriculum? What can we do to be more student-centered, which are really valid questions. But if you don't prove to those young people in the first place that you're actually willing to change for them and take their requests seriously, you're not even going to get to the higher level, curriculum, student-centeredness, all of those other really great ideas that, I believe are very effective. So yeah, I think part of being holistic is just being truly authentically responsive and accommodating to students.
I'm struck by the fact that somebody would ask you, you would tell them, and then they would act like you didn't say anything. Okay, Julian, you want to pick this up? You're still muted. Sorry.
So yeah, so when I look at this question, I really think about what school is intended to do and what is it intended to be. And I really believe that when we think about how we measure our student success, I think that's a very big one for me when it comes to what we are prioritizing. I believe that schools should be teachers and staff should be youth development experts. I believe that they should be able to center the student when it comes to what is going on in these environments. So I really believe that when it comes to the paradigm shift, it's really just looking at teachers as more of mentors, people who are not just, speaking at you, but more of facilitators, and really just changing that dynamic when it comes to education, of really prioritizing youth development. For me, in the work that I lead on on a daily basis, it's pushing 4 key values that every young person needs in life to succeed, and that's belonging. So key to young people. You have to belong in where you're at. Independence, mastery, generosity, all of these 4 key developmental needs that I feel like just aren't being prioritized in our education system at the moment. I think that things are priority, like getting good grades and test scores, when really when it comes down to what's the purpose of education, if you ask me, is to create thriving adults, and not only thriving adults, but create critical thinkers in our workforce. And I just think that there's a lot of elements of our education system at the moment that just doesn't match that.
You two are outstanding. Let's talk a little bit about culture. There's sort of a narrative about a cultural, ethnic, sort of racial disconnect between students and teachers. Is there? Do you experience it on a day-to-day basis? And in your school experience, did you have resources that took into account cultural relevance? And you can pick it up any way you want to. Just for the group, DJ Breeze is driving and he's parking. So we're going to let him be safe and then he'll be back. But please, either Lincoln or Julian, what about culture in the school?
I can take it, definitely. So culture in the school building. Yeah. So me growing up, I grew up on the north side of Minneapolis. So I went to North High, and I also went to Olson Middle School. And both places I went were about, say, at least 85% of students of color. But that was the complete opposite when it came to our administrators in the building. Well, our teachers in the building, I should say. Actually, administrators is a lot different. But with that being said, it's hard to really I think that just speaks to the disconnect from right there, just off of the gate. The fact that I've only had 2 Black teachers in my academic life, knowing that I've been living in predominantly areas of people of color since a young person. So, and I feel like a lot of, and another thing about it is, a lot of those teachers don't live in our communities, don't really understand what we go through on a daily basis. And that's just a disconnect. There was times in my education where I felt more comfortable in the dean's office than I did in my classroom. And it wasn't necessarily the teacher's fault, but it was more of me just having a dean that reflected who I was and could see, and I felt like they seen me. And that's very important for young people when they're going through their education experience. I just want to reel this back to what I was saying beforehand, those key developmental needs. That goes right with belonging. If young people do not have a sense of belonging in their school buildings, then it's going to be hard for them to succeed, and they're going to find a sense of belonging elsewhere. So it's really finding ways to get more people that reflect us in the school buildings, and not making it so hard for them to be teachers. So yeah.
Lincoln, you're vibing. Thank you. Thank you, Julian. Lincoln, you're vibing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Julian. And I can't necessarily speak to like a personal experience with racial disparities, but what I can say is when I was in elementary school, I went for a couple years to this school out in the suburbs. It was like a magnet school. I'm sure, like my parents had good reason to send me there. There was some attraction, but I was the only Jewish kid in the whole school. And that was kind of an interesting experience because at the time, you're in elementary school, that part of my identity wasn't, the most important for me. And I might have spoken to this actually in our last Disrupting with Purpose, but I did experience some kind of nasty remarks and like microaggressions about my religion, about my faith, to the point where I actually left the school and went to a Jewish school, like in middle school for a year. And that school that I had went to, the Jewish school, where I felt like I may have fit in for, that those people being my community and for being accepted in that way, all of the students there, it's a private school, all the students were extremely wealthy. And so now there is another disparity where, there is no belonging and there's no community, and I don't necessarily fit into the archetype of the student in that school. So in both environments, there was like a lack of community, just even with the students and with the teachers there being representative of me and where I come from. So I really found my community like in high school, where I went to a really diverse school that had pretty diverse teachers, but it was really more about the intentionally cultivated environment that was accepting of all students and invited teachers and students to build like deep and meaningful connections beyond the typical hierarchy that you might see.
I'm fascinated by the billions of dollars adults have used to throw at what education, and you're just saying, talk to us, collaborate with us, listen to us. Oh, this is fantastic. Do you mind if we invite an adult responder in and then we'll come back to team? Okay, fantastic, team. Thank you very much. At this time, I have the privilege of bringing to the, I want to say the stage, but to the camera, Ed Morales. He's going to give us his perspectives on what Lincoln and Julian have been sharing, and then we'll get back together and talk about it a little bit more. Thank you so much. Welcome, Ed.
Thanks for having me.
Come on in and share your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I don't know that I frankly have too much to add beyond that. The question of is it important for schools to affirm student experiences? Yeah, and develop them holistically. Of course it is. I don't know how the answer could be anything but yes, except that like, we ask schools to do a lot. And one of the things I think we see with a lot of these places like schools, like libraries, like social work in general, is that we ask folks to be doing too much without a whole lot of support to do it. We know that our schools are understaffed. We don't have a lot of people doing the work. We know that teachers are in the crosshairs, sometimes quite literally, of politics, of media, of the public. They got a big target on their back. And at the same time, we're always telling teachers and school staff that they're not doing enough, that they could be doing more. That may be true. And it's also like they're human beings who are trying to do their best with limited resources and limited support to do it. I would love to see that happen more often. I would love to be seeing schools meet young people where they're at and spend the time to understand what it means to develop young people holistically and to be able to do it. And I think it's also true that a lot of us who are in these positions in schools haven't necessarily had that experience ourselves of being developed holistically as human beings in the places that we work, and then we turn around and expect them to do it for young people. And I don't understand the theory there. There seems like there's something missing. So I think I would encourage us to think like even maybe one step back or a couple of steps back or something, and think about, well, how do we support these adults to be doing this work for themselves so that they can lead the work in our school settings as well? And that's a deep question. And I don't know how to answer, not a deep question like I'm tooting my own horn, but like that's a complicated question that's going to take some time to answer, I think,
This is a very, very good perspective. Please keep it up.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so the infrastructure piece, I was a school social worker for a long time. I don't do it anymore. It was too hard. It was too hard to do school social work. I loved working with young people. They're remarkable human beings. They taught me more about myself than I knew about myself. And I never really liked working with the adults. It was just too much work, too complicated. However, one of the things that I think is true is that schools in traditional approaches to education are organized around constant progress, always moving forward. We learn something in math, and we have to learn the next thing in math, and we have to learn the next thing in math. And a lot of the work that our young people need to be doing in their lives is not just about progress, but also about sitting and sometimes even moving backwards when they're working through some of the big stuff that they've experienced in their lives. We know there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of hopelessness about the world today. And if we're just working on progress in a school setting, where do we have the time to sit down and acknowledge, yeah, there's some big deal things happening in the world today that we have not really attended to. And here we are in 2023, and climate change is very real and happening right now, and is going to get worse before it gets better. And those are things that I will just speak to my generation, knew were out there, but didn't really have to deal with, I don't think, in the same way that young folks today are dealing with it. The other thing I would suggest for infrastructure is, so I'm also a parent. I'm an adoptive parent. I'm a transracially adoptive parent. I have two remarkable daughters one of whom is finishing up her senior year at a setting 4 school in Minneapolis Public Schools. And I will say that the way we respond to young people who we see as non-compliant or as not fitting in with expectations at school is pretty punitive. And we lose a lot of young people who get pushed out of schools because we continue to punish them and see them as young people who don't care or are lazy or aren't trying hard enough, none of which is true about any young person I've ever met, but that's how our discipline systems are traditionally organized. And so we suspend them and we push them out and we send a message that you're too much, you're not enough, you got to change yourself. And they're like, okay, we're going to go somewhere else. Kind of as Julian mentioned, like you found the connection on the streets. That makes sense to me. It's not going to be in schools if we're telling you, no, it's not in schools. And that's not right. Certainly we've experienced that in my family system, just constant suspensions and being placed up into this level 4 school. We have a lot of evidence-based approach to teaching pedagogy, but not so much to discipline. We have ideas about discipline and how quote unquote bad behavior happens, but our approach to it doesn't really reflect brain science. And I think that's troubling in schools. The last thing, I guess, I know I'm running out of time probably already, but the last thing I think I would say just about the cultural piece is, of course, we need representation in our schools. We know that the pipelines are messed up in Minnesota. We do not have enough teachers representing the students that they're going to be teaching, and not just the teachers, but anybody who's in a school building, going through the pipelines, getting into Minnesota schools, colleges, and then coming to teach. We also know that within schools, school leadership is often, not always, but is often white, whereas we see teachers who are often white, and oftentimes the educational specialists, the folks who are lower in the hierarchy, are the folks of color, which sends a message, I think, to our students. I will say, though, that representation isn't everything. And so I'm Puerto Rican and white, for example. I know that my experience as a Puerto Rican is different than a lot of Puerto Ricans' experience of being Puerto Rican. And so one person can't represent a whole people. And I don't think it's just about the representation, but can we get folks in there who, yes, represent our communities and understand what it means to grow up in North Minneapolis or to live there or wherever our young people are coming from, and can also do that work. That's really important too. So that's a lot right there, but I'll pause there.
Well, in my community, they would say that's a word. Danielle, welcome back. Would you lay a word down about this topic, knowing that we have been all over in a good way? Would you just share your thoughts before we transition and pivot?
I have so many thoughts because this conversation has been all over in a really good way. And I think really hitting on so many really important pieces that I've seen over the years. And I think the biggest thing for me is how all of this comes together around how do we make schools a place of safety and community that fosters our young people in belonging. What I heard from Lincoln and Julian was about where they're finding it is like schools where even if what's going on outside of the school is, what's happening in the community is not safe, is difficult, students going through a hard time, they would be able to come, as Lincoln was saying at her school, come to the school and be able to, do their laundry, be, respected, not have to be ashamed of having dirty clothes or something like that. I heard Julian say, going to the dean's office because you found connection and community there that you weren't finding in the classroom. And I know when I was overseeing, student behavior within Minneapolis Public Schools, oftentimes I would find myself in conversation with students, and I maybe was hearing things that, from their teacher, or, why are they getting removed from the classroom? Why are they being suspended? Then I would talk to the young person, and it's a completely different side of the story. And, it was, where do you find that understanding? And how can we make schools about being in community and building that community with one another? This is why I always see that restorative practice is so important in school, because it is about bringing someone back into the community of their classroom environment and being able to say, you know what, maybe you did something that was disruptive to our school community, but we love you and we want you to be with us. And this is how we make that right and build that relationship again. And before I finish, I want to touch on the issue, and it's been something that we've been talking about decades now, around the need for more teachers of color and Indigenous teachers. And, there is so much work underway. And I know my dear friend, Dr. Rose Chu, was part of the conversation in September. And this is, her life's work. And we're working on it. And this is what I would always tell, our people in the Native community back when I was director of American Indian Education in Minneapolis. This is something we're working on. And it's really important that we get more teachers of color and Indigenous teachers. But in the meantime, we need to work with the teachers we have now. And how do we get those teachers to understand our students of color, our Indigenous students, and understand that they come to school with a set of life experiences and a worldview that's just as valid and important as the teachers. And so when you're a teacher, it's your job to teach through the lens through which your students see the world. And that is how you show your students love and respect. And then those students will respond to you. So even if, you only have all white teachers, those teachers can work with students of color, but they have to work at it, and they have to work intentionally to understand where the students are coming from. And that is difficult. And we do put a lot on teachers' plates. Teachers I think during COVID, everyone realized how much teachers are heroes and what they did. Absolutely incredibly difficult. And, we're there for our students when our students needed them most. And so we're asking them, center around the students, because you're there because you love the students. And just to remember that, how do you build those relationships?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Danielle. Team, we're going to pivot. Welcome back, DJ Mickey Breeze. Let's talk about the importance of including your voices in how we improve the current environment. It seems to me that the adults are really in a cluster about what to do. And so we really do need to hear your voices and learn what we need to be doing. What barriers or obstacles do young people face when you're trying to have your voices heard? What are steps we can take to overcome this challenge? What Lincoln was saying, you tell them, they ask, they tell, and then everybody acts like they don't hear you. Whoever would like to can pick it up first. What are the obstacles? How do we get around them? Okay, let's go. DJ Mickey Breeze, you're up. You're on mute, beloved.
Here we go. All right, can everybody hear me? So sorry about that. Responsibilities are never a short list. So I think that getting your voice heard, either as a student or an administrator, is a very, very valued part to making any sort of change. I've seen a lot of things, a lot of progress come from students or come from youth as to how things can be changed in their community or in their general surroundings to make things better for themselves. But I've also heard that even those students may speak up a lot more about what priorities that they need attended to. I've heard from administrators sometimes about when they speak up or when they make their voice heard, that sometimes just because of regulations or simply because of the overall outlook of, teachers is lowly or sometimes a little bit disconnected from, I guess, the real world factors that go into improving an educational environment. Sometimes it gets a little bit drowned out. But I do believe that it starts on a more involved level. Anybody that's receiving any sort of help, or anybody that needs to, be attended to, or anybody that some resources are beneficial for, should always have a say into how they want things carried out. But I believe that in some cases, people are just a little bit limited by, even if they speak, who are the real people in charge that can actually help create change.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking with who's that. Lincoln, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with what you were sharing, because it's I mean, I'm an organizer, so I'm thinking about this from an organizing perspective. It's a lot more than just teachers asking students, hey, what can we change, even if they listen? That's not enough. Because like the reality is students and teachers are so far removed from the institutions of power that govern our school systems that you can have as much grassroots change within the school as you want, and it doesn't solve the problem. And even if it does, it's only solving the problem for your school. Like, what about all the other schools? So it really comes down to, well, there's a couple issues. One, it's, school boards are not always full of people who work in schools. Students are too young to vote for the people who appear on their school boards. Students are too young to vote for any of their representatives. So, that's another issue that maybe we can work on changing. But it's, a lot of funding goes into education every year. I believe that Minneapolis Public Schools is actually one of the most highly funded school districts in the country, but you wouldn't know it by going into any one of our public schools. You would have no idea. The facilities, the outdated textbooks, outdated technology, the lack of material resources for students, it's just appalling to me, honestly, and feels like a huge misuse of public funds. And so if my tax dollars are going to fund the public school system, I would like to know that those resources are going directly to benefiting the students and the teachers who are there on a daily basis, not necessarily to fund whatever, wherever that money is going at this moment, because it doesn't really feel like it's trickling down to the students or to any kind of impact on their lives. But it's really, this is just like a core issue in any public issue. It's that, change needs to be led by the people most affected, and systems need to be governed by the people most impacted. And that just isn't the case at any level in the US. So even if we take this back down to a school level, where with this example, how do we get teachers to listen to students and students to tell teachers what they need? Well, every student government I've ever seen is full of straight A students who, have the resources to be successful, have tutors, and, are just like exceptional students, and that's great. But why are the students making decisions in schools not the ones who are experiencing truancy or like lower grades? Because those are the students who the school is not successful for. So if you're not asking those students and making an effort to have those students be the leaders of whatever transformation happens in their school, I believe that's a disservice.
Excellent. I see, Julian, you're ready. Come on.
Oh yeah, so I'll just try to keep this one brief, but just to name it off the bat, it's just a lot of adults practice adultism without even realizing it. And I think that's very deep when it comes to what we're talking about when it's young people spreading their voices. A lot of times young people will speak out. Like somebody was saying a little earlier, like just ask us. We have the answers. It's just more of, what are you going to do with those answers? Are you going to hear us and what we got to say and then look at Julian like right now, like, my gosh, he's such a cool young person. He was so cute and polite and he knew how to speak well, but are you really going to hear me and work with me together to get the change that I needed when I was a young person? Because I think that's a barrier that I've came up with a lot in this work that I've been doing, trying to lead change. And so I'd say, especially for education change, for me, it's just really just the narrative around education. And I don't think there's not enough people to really understand what we mean when we say redesign schools, reimagine what schools can look like. Because a lot of people, they get so stuck on kind of like any change in life. It's hard to embrace it if you can't see it. So it's really about that narrative shift and really being able to really articulate what education change can look like, and really for people to get on board with it. But I really do think it's that piece of really looking at young people as experts to the issue of education, because we, like Lincoln said, we are the closest to the issues, especially the ones who education is not working for. So to really understand that adults need to work with us and value us as stakeholders on the issue, and not just young people that they need to check a box on. Because sometimes that's how it feels. Sad to say, but yeah.
Thank you, each and all. To any one of you, can intergenerational dialogue help? And if so, how might it help?
So I feel, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say very much so. Speaking a little bit to what Julian was talking about as far as the age doesn't necessarily mean experience. It's more about people who are experienced in what they're going through or what affects them. I completely agree with it. As a musician for about 13 years, all I've heard coming up was either A, you don't know this because you're too young, or B, I know better than you because I'm older, and have had that whole theory or ideal proven wrong very, very, very many times. But the trick to it is that a lot of people think that because you have some sort of age gap or because you have some sort of time gap between your experience in a certain environment versus somebody else, that you can't collaborate. That's a lot of the time, where a lot of the mindset that a lot of people get into when they want to feel some sort of seniority or when they want to feel some sort of exclusivity. Like, a lot of people try to think that because they fit into a certain age range or into a certain demographic, that they would know more than others. Instead of, the solution would be sharing these things. I've had tons of people, like as a teacher myself, giving any advice on like music education, music production, live shows and stuff like that. I've had tons of people who have been like, oh, I've come into the game with 10, 15 years of experience, this, that, and third, and I could teach them something that they never knew existed, or that they never knew was an issue, or that they never knew was a possible resource. And so I think that since a lot of people get in the mindset of, I'm younger, so I know more about this topic, or I'm older, so I know more about everything, they get so caught up in that mindset that they don't share information with each other to come to one sort of more universal bank of information that everybody can use and that everybody can make some sort of better outcome with.
Thank you, DJ. Nikki Breeze. Lincoln.
Yeah, I could tell we all feel very strongly about this topic, but I really, really believe that intergenerationalism is, the first step, or maybe even just the answer to a lot of the issues we've spoken about. In general, as a young person, I'm 20 years old. I've been in a lot of situations, especially when I've been involved in organizing campaigns or like working in the nonprofit world, where people interact with me as if I am lacking experience, which in some ways, sure, I am. But young people are not acknowledged as having the lived experience that they do. And that lived experience is not held up to the same standard always as maybe like a college degree or a traditional, traditional markers of experience that people carry in like the corporate world. And there also, on the flip side, have been plenty of people who have valued me for my lived experience. I think this conversation is an example of that. The three of us are being valued for our lived experience, despite being on the younger side. At the same time, adults in that situation, maybe they have the lived experience of being a student, but it was a long time ago. But what they can bring is wisdom. And that's something that I don't have because I'm 20. Maybe I have a little, who knows? But I think there aren't a lot of great models in Minnesota or even in our country right now of intergenerationalism, or of a system of intergenerationalism that is actually responsible for making a lot of impact, because I think it needs to be codified in existing systems. So, like I mentioned earlier, young people need to be voting members of school boards. If that is written into the law, that guarantees the right of young people to hold maybe a certain number of seats on a school board. And honestly, if that right isn't protected by law, I don't think it will happen most of the time. Because I've even seen a push to add young people onto school boards as non-voting members, which I think is great, but feels almost symbolic and not like true intergenerationalism. In the same way, it's like in a school, young people and teachers working alongside one another to, have meaningful conversations about what that school could look like in order to meet everyone's needs. I think that's a great example of intergenerationalism, but it's really up to the individual administrators and sometimes teachers in that school to make it happen. That happens in schools where people are already passionate and already believe in that. But if that intergenerationalism isn't required by law in some way, or isn't part of the system we exist in, it's just not always going to happen.
Excellent. Thank you, Lincoln. We have about a minute, Julian, and I'm going to come back to you in the Q&A in just a minute before we call Heather Alden up. But would you like to just put a pin in it, Julian?
Yeah, I'd say that a lot of these things when we're talking about just working with our young people cohesively and intergenerationally, it's like simple things like Lincoln was referring to, getting young people on school boards and having really a say in what's going on in those meetings and a stake in their education. So working with us, not just hearing what we have to say, but also continuing to take steps, working alongside us to enact that change along with us so we can understand the process. And also one last thing that I would say is that young people, we want to work alongside our elders to make this change. And going off of what Lincoln was saying, that literally don't just ask for the straight A students or the ones with the best GPAs to get these opportunities to do change maker work, but get the young people who school is not working for, who the young people who are going through adversities. And really, this change maker work can really be purposeful for young people. So it could really think about how that could get them on a better track, really changing their schools and what's going on in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sorry I only had a minute there, but we will come back. Heather Alden, please join us on camera. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Heather. What are a couple of thoughts that you have related to what we've just heard?
Well, to be honest, I'm honored to be here. I am a school social worker, so I work in schools with youth, and I have been doing it for a long time. And honestly, I have so many ideas, but one of the things I want to lift up is thank you for the three of you for your passion and lifting up it. Honestly, there's power being at the table. There's power at like being in the spaces where decisions are made. And the best way to get there is to push your way in and make people tell you no. I mean, I think as long as you're open to the idea of getting in spaces and places and bringing forward your voice, I think that adults would be lucky to have that opportunity. I think a lot of adults don't know how to work with youth. I think that adults don't remember what it's like to be a youth. And I think youth are probably more interesting than adults. I think Ed and I share that. We like youth better than grown-ups sometimes. I worked in schools because I just understand youth a lot better. But I think that and I think you were saying it, Julian, the value of having all voices there, because if you have all students who have been doing really, really historically really well, then that system that's created is totally working, right? But if we have students at the table that are having hiccups or challenges or not meeting their needs, then let's have all students at the table saying, hey, there's some gaps here, there's some blind spots, there's some areas that are being missed in schools. And I really think that adults, and I'm hopelessly optimistic because that's what keeps me up in the morning. I'm a tree hugging, hopelessly optimistic person. And I also believe adults don't know what they don't know. And so they're going to assume that what they've got planned out is going to work. And so if they're going to be, the idea is adults need to be humble in what they don't know and be able to listen, not listen to respond, but listen to understand. And also I think we need youth who are going to be willing to have those conversations. We're all better when we all do better. I think schools are trying desperately to figure out how to do things better. I don't think they know. I think a lot of times people making decisions, and I think this speaks to what you were talking about, Lincoln, are people who don't have lived experience. They haven't been in classrooms. School board members have not been in front of kids. They don't always know that much. So having more people who are boots on the ground, who know what the work looks like, who know what the hallways feel like, they know what the classroom vibe is a lot of people who should be making decisions, both the youth and those teachers and those people that are right there in the spaces and places. I think that using lived experience, using youth voice, like we're doing today, you guys are professionals, you're consultants, you can consult other people. And that's something that we need to value and lift up and pay people like you to be involved in this, to make the change happen, because that's where radical change happens. every good thing in our world that's happened, it comes from youth. I mean, it started with the French Revolution. Like, it is really cool to see the power of youth. I've got two daughters myself, 17 and 19, so I'm in the middle of it. And so I really think that it's important to have all voices at the table, and the power of you all to come and bring it forward is really awesome. Go ahead. No, you're good.
Thank you. I'm just going to, thank you, Heather. Please stay with us. I'm going to invite Danielle Grant to come back. Just give us a word or two on this second domain. I'm sorry we don't have a lot of time, team.
That's okay. Like, the main thing, I'm just finding this conversation to be incredibly inspiring. And like, two things I wanted to touch on. Number one, you know, getting young people's voices into the conversation and into decision making is so important, because they have different perspective. And it's, yes, they're in it right now, but they see things differently. And I know Minneapolis Public Schools has done youth participatory evaluation. And when I was an administrator, groups of young people who were looking at different issues in their school and then coming together with their findings, they were looking at the data differently than I was looking at it. They saw things that people who are professional researchers were not seeing, because we're not in the day-to-day as with their perspective as young people. It was incredibly valuable. And that's why you have to listen to those voices. You know, and I will also personally say, and I know that Julian and Lincoln are involved in Bridgemakers. Some of the work that Bridgemakers has been doing and the conversation I've been having with folks from Bridgemakers has been completely revitalizing to me over the last several years, because it's so inspiring to see the power that young people can have when they're kind of organizing and channeling and really, you know, refusing to take no for an answer around these are the things young people, and so much has been done. And I just, it's, to me, it's incredibly inspiring, and just shows we need those voices in more places, in more avenues.
We need your voices in more places and spaces, Heather and Danielle. And I'm sorry that we don't have more time today, but we are very grateful for the contributions you've made to this Disrupting with Purpose. And we would look forward to hearing from you both again. Thank you for your support today. And I'd like to welcome back to camera, please, Ed Morales. We'll begin our Q&A session. And team, if you haven't submitted your questions in the chat, please feel free to do so. I will go ahead and posit the questions, and whoever would like to, please pick it up. We will have about 10 minutes for this segment. All right, here we go. Which would be better? Each teacher skillfully asking if their students need laundry and food provided, or one person known in the school to go for these things? What's the best way to get the message to young people in school that food and laundry are available?
I could take that one. Just speaking off of my experience, just being a person in a place of need, certain times, I feel like I would need a person that I'm comfortable with to be able to share that type of information to. So I definitely think that point people in school buildings are very key when it comes to those type of issues, because a lot of young people, they might feel discouraged, you know, admitting that, and especially if there's a teacher that offers it up that they're not connected to. So yeah, I definitely think that having that key mentor in school buildings that could connect to young people at a different type of level is definitely what I think would be the best way to go about that sort of thing.
Excellent. Thank you. If you feel particularly passionate, I'm just going to keep going through a series of questions. Just go back to the previous question if you'd like to, okay? How could we get students to feel valued enough to speak their needs to parents or school administration? There's an issue where the students don't feel like their opinions matter enough to speak them when they can't even vote for who makes the change.
I'd like to take that one. Honestly, establish it in earlier stages. A lot of people go into a school or educational system with the mindset that because you are student and I am teacher, or vice versa, that there's already some sort of preset value on that relationship. And typically, how it's regarded in most media or most pre-existing formulations of that relationship it sort of insinuates that students are a little less valued than the teachers or the administrators. But I feel like in earlier stages of students getting to, interact with their teachers, I feel like it would be great to simply just establish that some things are purely, open desk policy. If you need anything said, if you need anything voiced, you can do that at any given moment in time, versus having to gradually figure it out over time, or, oh, I have to get cool with the teacher first in order to be heard. I feel like just very vividly pointing those things out from school and staff administration and stuff like that could help disrupt the idea that students aren't valuable a lot.
Thank you very much. If I could find my mute button. Thank you. Lincoln, you're up next, I believe. Adults can be socially awkward in youth space. How can we teach adults to persevere through the awkwardness as we reach out to a young person again and again? It does take time to build that bond, and adults give up quickly when we feel awkward and out of the adult element. What feedback or encouragement can young folks give to adults as we teach other adults to get in there and connect with youth?
Honestly, that's a really valid question. To me, that comes back to a lot of the, in my opinion, irrelevant hierarchies that exist not only in the school system, but just in our social interactions in general. And just, if you subscribe to a particular power dynamic or don't, address your own internalized tendencies to exist within a power dynamic or hierarchy, it's going to be difficult to break out of that. And that's one of the biggest issues I see in like spaces where young people and adults are being brought together for the first, second, or even like fifth or sixth time. It's hard to break down the, students may feel, oh, I can't give my most, like, I can't say what I actually care about because maybe the teacher is going to be mad at me and that will like affect the way that I'm treated. And the teacher is like, well, I can't be too casual or I won't be respected by my classroom, which are both really valid things to think. It's just the power dynamic that doesn't need to exist. And if we can get to a place where like mutual respect and conversation can exist outside of the power dynamic, students can both respect the teacher and invite them to, have these conversations, while also knowing that, that teacher really sees them as a human and like really feels that they belong. And I think it comes back to what Julian brought up, like at the beginning of our conversation. It's, belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. And that cycle can exist for people at any age group. It's not just about young people.
I love it. Ed, you're smiling. What's on your mind?
Right. I just love when folks say things so eloquently. I mean, that's all. That's all. It's just really nice to be in a space with folks who are so thoughtful and so passionate and are able to speak so directly to what's needed. That's awesome. Then I don't have to.
I love it. And this is why we need Youthprise. What would you want people to know when they're leaving this space? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to take with them? And maybe it's to remember 3 things. So each one of you, one thing.
Age doesn't mean experience. As far as getting involved in a different community or something that you're not familiar with, pretty much take all resources that you can from those around you, regardless of what they might look like, how old they are, how young they are, and just go off of, experience from any stage.
Thank you. Anybody else can pick it up? Lincoln, Julian?
Yeah, I think, just to what I was mentioning about hierarchies just now, power dynamics exist whether we like it or not. And each of us has a unique place in the power dynamic of this world and like our political system. And I think that, it is our responsibility to use the leverage and power that each of us hold to further this cause that we believe in one way or another. You don't need to know all the answers. I think that there's even a situation where I recognize I'm not representative of high school students anymore. I graduated in 2020. So what do I know about what's going on in a classroom right now? I'm not actually a youth advocate. I'm an advocate for people in my age group and my, set of belief systems, but I also need to defer to young people whose experiences that I've never had. So let's use the power that we have to make a difference and defer to the people who are most impacted to lead that change.
People are calling you out to run for office, and I can see why. Julian, bring us home, please.
Really, what I want to kind of do is find time to answer this question I've seen coming up in this chat. A lot of people are asking what those core developmental principles, where they're coming from. It's actually a framework that is called Reclaiming Youth at Risk. So it's a circle of courage, which is the circle that shows the principles. And the reason it's a circle is because you cannot go from one to the other. So it is thousands of years of indigenous teachings that is backed up by neuroscience. So it is not something that I just pulled out of a hat, or it's something that actually practitioners all around the world have been using this framework to deal with young people that deal with the most adversities in life all around the world. Actually, me and my Good Trouble team actually spoke at their 50th anniversary opening plenary conference just last summer. Came there with some high school students. So yeah, it's a framework that we have developed. That we have adopted from our elders, and it's something that we very much just hold very true to us. And we believe that if our education system could be prioritizing those youth that are facing adversities, imagine how it will impact the masses.
This has me saying that's what I'm talking about. Ed, is there anything you want to leave us with? What do you want people to take away?
That Lincoln and Julian should be on more panels, and I am excited to hear more from everybody on this panel in the future. That's all. We look forward to the running mate ticket sometime in the future, I hope, if that's how you choose to become involved in the future.
That's fantastic. I'm going to pick up what they're laying down. I'm following where you're leading, whatever we can do. Is there anything else that you want the team to know before we ask them to reflect for the year, the last Disrupting with Purpose, on what they want to do, what they want to see for 2024? Okay. Well, I just want to say, I'm so happy you were here. I feel so lucky. I feel expanded every time I hear you speak, so I can take these things to all the places where I go, never not attributing it to you, always giving you proper attribution. I'm so glad to be here and so thankful for your contribution. I want to thank all of our panelists who came back for conversation number 2. Hope to see you again next year. And thanks to our adult panelists who came to share their perspectives with us and to round things out. We're very, very grateful. We want to thank the artist group, the drummers who taught us about the beauty of culture and its necessity in healing and getting better. We want to thank Youthprise for all of the opportunities you provide for us to have these conversations. And we want to thank the event group that put us together. Thank you, Katie and Tom. And now, to lead our closing chat activity, we are asking if you would be so kind as to leave a word in the chat. One thing you'll take away or a highlight from 2023, perhaps you just got it today, right now, this minute, or one thing you're looking forward to in 2024. We would relish your responses and would love to share them. Please do share them in the chat. This has been a marvelous and wonderfully exciting time. I'm so honored to have been the moderator from the first Disrupting with Purpose to this one. And I'm hopeful that you've had as good an experience as we have. Each of our panelists brings me hope that tomorrow can be brighter than today. And the way that I have ended every one of my presentations or my speaking engagements this year, I think I may do next year as well. It is generally with a slide that says 100%. Lincoln, Julian, DJ Mickey Breeze, that's the degree to which things can change. I hope that you will have a wonderful rest of your year. I look forward to seeing you again next year. And thank you for your generosity in being here and in providing your feedback for the chat. Youthprise, take it away.